The following hour is brought to you by MidasResources.com. Call Midas Resources today to protect your future at 1-800-686-2237.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we are joined by the illustrious Tim Alexander, otherwise known as Lord Sterling. Tim, the reason why we have you on the program is you have remarkable talents at seeing through the geopolitical fog of war. You know the hardware, you know the equipment more than anyone else on any other network. I know there's lots of great people, Gerald Celente and lots of other pundits that deal with financial issues. But they also, number one, have to have a Christian point of view and have a hardware knowledge and a knowledge of the game of war, the multi-stage, what I call space chess game, like Star Trek, the multi-level Star Trek level. And one of the latest stories you just told me a minute ago, and I'm glad I'm sitting down so I don't fall down. But I'm not going to steal your thunder. For God's sake, tell us this story. I mean, this is so over the top. This is. I remember Dustin Hoffman wag the dog. Just a second. You remember Dustin Hoffman? Before I let you blow everybody away. Remember the Wag the Dog movie and had Dustin Hoffman in there, Wag the Dog? And they had all these sets set up to actually...
Absolutely. It was all fake.
I'm pulling my hair out, not physically, but emotionally, thinking, what the heck is going on here? Tell us the story.
Well, we had a couple releases from the ISIS. It's called different things, but this is the group of terrorists that are on the outskirts of Baghdad, and they've been in Syria. Now they're in Syria and Iraq, and are getting close to causing the government to fall, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so there were a couple of things where they took surrendered prisoners out and machine gun them. And there's just within the last couple of days, there's a very famous video. It's very clear, and it shows a long string of guys in kind of a ditch, and they make them lay down, and then they use their AK-47s and they kill them. Now, it has now been established and proven that the photos of the dead bodies were photoshopped. It's a fake.
Oh, my.
Now, well, first off, before you even get to the point where you say it's a fake, what the heck, you have to ask yourself, okay, if these guys are going to commit war crimes, why do they photograph it and then release it to the world?
Because they want to justify the George H.W. Bush being there. They want a missile attack on these areas, which, by the way, when you have a civil insurgency, and you know as a military expert, you can't start missile attacks when millions of people rise up, or you're going to kill a heck of a lot of civilians. Women and children and everybody who's not even involved are extreme Muslims. And the same thing goes with doing this because they want to justify a missile attack on Syria, which will result in Syria releasing all the Russian-based super weapons that'll put our Navy to the bottom of the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf and cause a lot of death and destruction.
World War III and a general Middle Eastern war, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, well,
you have to stand back from the trees, way back, and see the forest and see the patterns in the forest. And one of the things that I do is I spend about 4 or 5 hours a day looking at news and gathering some articles and putting them on my site, preparing for your site. Or your show, and I'm an analyst, and when you do that, you've got a good overview of the flow of news globally.
Right.
And one thing that I've been noticing the last couple of weeks is the numbers of stories about Islamic terrorism and brutality against Christians and women, and not just in the Middle East, in Africa, they've captured so many women and so forth. Yeah. The number has spiked. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a lot of Islamic terrorists out there that aren't cutthroats. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But what I'm saying is I'm seeing a pattern here. See, there's a spike. Okay, and that's it's part of a psychological warfare operation to get Americans and Europeans to demand, we've got to stop these bums. They're killing all these innocent people. We've got to at least bomb them. We don't have to invade, but we should at least bomb them.
Why is bombing an option anyway? Number one, the bombs are expensive. Number two, it kills civilians. Number three, it makes people who otherwise would be our allies hate our guts. Don't want to buy our stuff. Don't want to even collaborate with us in any other projects.
You're thinking like a rational Christian human being. No. You're not supposed to think like that.
Right. But what I have to do is you have to
certainly not Christian.
Exactly. Please continue.
Okay. Now, this is all tied in. Remember, I think it was last time I was on the show, I talked about an article I wrote called Connections, and it was an analysis. How the Ukraine is tied into Syria, to Iraq, to Iran. First off, all the players. Who's running the Ukraine? Well, you have a Zionist central banker oligarch who just got elected president. You have a Zionist central banker who's the prime minister of the coup junta.
Right.
Okay, now what's that got to do with the Ukraine? Well, it all goes back to Russia and the last year and a half. About a year and a half ago, the United States and Israel were getting ready to attack Iran. And who basically put their foot down and said, we'll go in, we're not going to lie, we're not going to sit still for it, but Russia. About a year ago, the United States, France, Great Britain, and Israel were going to attack Syria. Things weren't working out too good with all the foreign mercenaries they were sending into Syria. So they trumped up this thing, well, the Syrians had used gas. No, the Syrians hadn't used gas warfare.
It doesn't even hold up to logic. I mean, you tore that apart before anybody else. Why would you use gas in civilian areas in a city where your own troops could be exposed to the gas? I mean, and they even come up later on in the Russians did a forensic analysis and proved that
the rebels did it.
Right, we know that the rebels did it with collaboration with Israel and with American special forces.
And Turkey.
This is so in Turkey, and this is so darn evil to actually trump us up. Now they got trumped up pictures of beheadings to make it, oh my gosh, the Muslims are going crazy.
Exactly. Okay, now what stopped that a year ago, not quite a year ago, was Russia sent a very large battle fleet into the Eastern Med off of Syria. And I'm talking about the biggest ship they sent was actually a pocket battleship or a battle cruiser, bigger than any cruiser, massive thing.
Right.
Well, they put their foot down and they said, if you go in, we're going in too. And so, okay, everybody backed off. Well, the whole thing in the Ukraine is to punish Putin and to tie him down. Okay, now what just happened within the last 24 hours is there was a major natural gas pipeline explosion in the Ukraine. I've been expecting this.
Right.
Of course, I don't necessarily, the things I expect, I don't necessarily go out on a limb and say, because if it doesn't happen, you look like a jerk, and I do that enough anyway.
Well, I warned that if they did that, it could precipitate a Russian invasion just to stop them from blowing up the lines.
That's what they want. One more too big to ignore thing slap in the face of Russia because they want Russia to come in, because they want Russia to be tied down.
It happened right after, and we don't have a party that's involved that did it. It happened right after Russia literally cut off the gas to the Kiev junta, basically. And so what's happening? Kiev junta wouldn't make a proper financial deal because Russia wants to make a deal. They're like,
here's what the coup junta wanted to do. They wanted to buy the natural gas for less than what Russia was selling it to the rest of the countries in Europe, so they could turn around and sell to them themselves for a nice profit. And Russia said, sorry, you guys have caused us nothing but trouble, and we're not about to line the coffers of your billionaire oligarchs.
Right.
Okay. Well, anyway, getting back to the big picture, this whole thing with the ISS and the attack heading towards Baghdad, we'll We'll get back to
keep
it.
that thought, Tim.
It's all tied together, and it's designed to get us to want to go after them. And as soon as we start bombing, we'll start bombing in Syria, and that triggers everything.
Of your analysis.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Please continue.
Okay. The ISIS is a backdoor to a war with Syria. The Gulf Cooperative Council states, particularly a couple of them, including Saudi Arabia, and the United States, Britain, and France have put a great deal of money into arming the so-called rebels in Syria, which are really almost exclusively foreign mercenaries. They've spent billions of dollars, sent tens and tens of thousands of these characters from all over the Middle East. And the Syrians are just chewing them up and spitting them out. Now, the Syrians, they're not fighting for Assad, they're fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their country, their land, their house, their wives, their children, their parents, their grandparents, their neighbors, their friends.
Yeah.
And they're tough, and they have several years' experience now. So that continuation of that game is not really going to work, and we can send in more and better high-tech weaponry, and Russia can do the same. That's not working. So they need something else. They've tried the Ukraine thing. They've set the bear trap for the Russian bear, and Putin so far has avoided stepping into it. They keep upping the ante, one more slap in the face, and Putin knows the game, and he's been very shrewd. It's not that he doesn't want to go in and kick their butts. It's he knows the big picture. Okay.
Right.
So when now all of a sudden, out of the blue, we have this terrible Islamic terror group, which, by the way, the CIA and the Saudis have funded for years, are running the operation, are equipping the operation, arming them, training them, coordinating, giving them intelligence from satellite recon and everything else. This didn't just happen out of the blue. Okay. So now all of a sudden they're on the outskirts of Baghdad, and we've got to stop them. And just today, Prime Minister Cameroon of the United Kingdom said these ISIS guys are the greatest security threat to the United Kingdom. It reminded me of Tony Blair. The BS is really deep and thick. Okay. We got to do something, and you keep seeing stories about Islamic terrorists doing terrible things, and not just there, but other places, okay, like in Africa.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, I'm not saying that many of them aren't terrible, but if you look at the patterns, there's been this big spike. It's part of a psyop campaign to prepare the masses to be stupid, to say, oh, yes, we got to go to war. We got to go to war. At least we got to bomb them. Well, bombing them, how do you not bomb them in Syria if you're bombing them across the imaginary line in the desert in Iraq? So once you get the camel's nose under the tent, the camel follows, okay? And once you begin bombing them with American and Saudi, maybe, or what other,
but they can respond in kind.
And British and French fighter bombers, well, then we begin to establish a safe zone, safe from Saddam or from Assad's forces, and we begin attacking Syria directly. Now, Iran knows the game. They're not going to tolerate that.
No. In fact, there's a couple of
this war that I call him BB 666 Netanyahu.
I love that.
So desperately once has been trying for a couple of years this general Middle East war, so he can use his nukes and American nukes and take out all of his enemies and break up all the countries, and he'll be, in effect, king of the Middle East.
Right.
But the globalists, the global banking cartel families, the 8 families and the 30 families, they have so set everything up for their new world order. Everything's got to collapse, and everything is ready to collapse. Well, they have to do it very carefully, or the people will realize it's the banksters that have done this, and maybe we ought to string them up. And there are a whole lot of us and very, very few of them. They may have billions, But you know what? They can still die very easily.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's a couple of geopolitical factors I want you to comment on. The first one you pointed out before is that half of Syria is mountainous. They have the Yukon hypersonic cruise missile, the Alexander, the Hoot supercavitation torpedo, the S-300 anti-aircraft systems, and I wouldn't doubt that the Russians will transfer other weapon systems there that'll make it basically impenetrable for our Air Force to bomb them. I think what's going to happen is you're going to find they not only have the MiGs forces, which, by the way, their jets are superior to our Joint Strike Fighter F-35, which can't keep up with a 1950s or 60s MiG-style fighter.
Well, that's because we've become so corrupt at the top, we no longer even build good planes. It's all about corruption.
Right, so what we have is that we have a corruptocracy, or a kleptocracy, that's so kleptocratic that basically it can't even build a proper plane, and it costs enormous amounts of money. Then we do stupid things like we think we can decontaminate the Ronald Reagan, and now we have a $2 billion aircraft carrier that basically is a radioactive wreck. And they don't even administer...
The first sailor has already died, and there are many of them that are very, very sick.
Right, and I was involved with that. We were going to do a talk, but then I had to back up because the people who were involved didn't ask my recommendations on detoxification. You need to verify. I'm an occupational doctor by training, and I know how to detoxify someone properly, and actually have to verify. You have to do proper radioisotope scanning tests like Jones Labs. You have to actually measure, perhaps bone marrow, peripheral blood smears, peripheral analysis with a pathologist, levels of radiotoxins after you do a challenge. You can actually put people in, there's a facility that I would refer people to in Utah that's the only one in America at the university in Utah that actually made from battleship steel before the first nuclear bomb was exploded, and that's the only way you can actually measure if their body has radioisotopes that are releasing, alpha particles and neutrons. Because if you use any battleship steel made after that, believe it or not, all the battleship steel on Earth is contaminated with radioisotopes because of nuclear testing, even before the bomb was dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. People don't know that. And I hear yahoos that are so-called think they're qualified. They don't have the first faintest idea how complex this process is to decontaminate someone and actually test accurately to see if what you did worked. They don't know.
Well,
it's disturbing.
And I hear people. Problem is at the very top, in the White House and in Congress. They don't care about our people.
Firstly, they're unqualified.
They don't care about our troops, our sailors, our airmen. They don't care.
They have a soul defect. They basically lack a relationship with the Most High God. That's the first and most serious. Secondly, they have an IQ defect. People like Obama are a social organizer. He couldn't operate an ice cream stand on a beach in a hot day. He hasn't operated. Okay,
true.
We have career politicians that their main thing is how do they prostitute to get a higher price than the highest priced whores in the nation in order to stay whoring to the transnational corporations. And when they say they're a Christian or this or that, they're a Christian only. They're what we call like rhinos, Republican in name only. They're rhinos, Christian in name only. How's that? Rhinos. Sinos, Christian in name only. CINO.
Springtime is save big time at Herbal Healer Academy. Long-term customers know spring is the time to stock up at
leading dialect.
So, Tim, let's move on to some of the news, talking about Ukraine a bit. We've got the gas line attack. We have Gazprom cutting off the gas to Kiev. We have apparently some reports about 38,000 troops on the other side of the border during these war games. Have foreign troops from NATO arrived now into the war theater to start war games with the junta in Kiev, which basically doesn't have proper, if you want to call it.
I don't think they're in the Ukraine yet, but they are in Poland, and they are in the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. And, of course, we've sent over at least 2 B-2 bombers, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you hear about the Russian bombers that came within 50 miles of the California coast here just a few days ago?
Yeah, and our boys bragged, we could have shot them down, we intercepted them. Well, yes, but you see, they weren't really on a bomb run, because if they were on a bomb run, they wouldn't have got 50 miles off. They would have launched their stealth hypersonic cruise missiles about 200 miles out. And L.A. and San Diego and San Francisco and Seattle wouldn't be there.
Yeah, what happened is the Russians have these Tupolev heavy jets that carry tremendously large bombs. But there's high-speed cruise missiles. They have a Topol M missile that basically has chaff in other ways that avoids pretty well all of our missile defense systems except for one, which is what's called Missile Defense Array. It's a high-altitude plasma array that they set with these nanoparticles that are poisoning us all with aluminum, barium, strontium, and cesium. Strontium and aluminum, and all these heavy metals. What they do is they are very paramagnetic, so they create what's called an array.
Which comes from Tesla, but originally.
Right.
But go ahead.
Right. What they do is they superheat it, and it fries the missile guidance system. So it basically fries the missile as it's trying to come in on its target. So it can't either, number one, explode, number two, it can't find its target. That's the most important part, because theater air defense, which is way more advanced than Patriot 1 or 2, has been operational since 1982. This is by the way, before Gulf One. And when Gulf One happened, the guys at Special Defense Command told me this specifically. They didn't have one Patriot 1 missile. They actually put it on the drawing board and then jumped over it in the technology and their engineering and created Patriot 2 on their CAD/CAM systems. And they went beyond that and said, no, we're going to go to theater air defense. So they developed a missile that hit a missile, and they were testing at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I took care of the employees who were actually monitoring the tests at White Sands Missile Base and Vandenberg. And I asked him, I said, how accurate is this? He said, we're getting up to 70% accuracy if we know the missile's coming. I said, what happens if you get like 10 missiles? He said, we might be down to 10 or 20%. I said, how long will it take before you guys are really accurate missile to hit a missile, and you hit all, say, 10,000 or 20,000 warheads that come from Russian warheads? He said, probably 2035, 2045, and around 70 to 100 trillion.
No, even then they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I know. This is just in ballpark. He said, and $100 trillion. I said, what?
$100 trillion.
Yeah, and I said, that's a T word. I said, like Tyrannosaurus Rex, it's wrecking your world economy. So I said, so what you guys have created is literally an event horizon economically, so that you can pour money into this event horizon that goes into people's pockets in the military-industrial intelligence complex, and you have no prospect. Now, of course, they do have this shield, and this shield is 100%, by the way. But the thing is, they're poisoning us while they're doing it, because these heavy metals, they get into our bodies and destroy our health, right? And this is besides Fukushima, by the way. They destroy the ozone.
Die anyway.
They destroy the ozone layer, which is why the ozone layer is really thinning, because the last 30 years, these maniacs have been putting these particles up. It's not just the last 5 or 10 years, and we can't just blame Obama. Obama is a Punch and Judy punching bag. Just like George Bush is the previous drug addict.
30 years ago in London, shall we say, a well-connected person told me that there was this hole over the ozone over Antarctica, and I said, "Oh my God, you're kidding."
It's not just there. There's a hole there, but there's a thinning everywhere. And the thing is, if you look at it, and we can get it right now, people say, I'm skeptical, Deagle's nuts, he's this, he's that. They get all kinds of ad hominem attacks. They don't like the way I look, or talk, or I slur words, or talk too fast, or interrupt guests. But don't believe any of the crap I say, please. In fact, I beg you, do not believe a single thing until you trust, like Ronald Reagan before too many aspartame-laced jelly beans, trust but verify. So what you do is you go get a UV meter, you can go to LSEMF, put out the cash because you think I'm a nut, go get a UVB meter, a UVC and D meter, go and test it, and you can say, wow, no wonder it's not good to go out in the sunshine midday. Because you're going to get pterygium that'll grow across your visual axis. You're going to get burns in your skin. You're going to get suppression of your immune system. You're going to get all kinds of bad stuff because the sunlight is toxic, because they're screwing with it, because they've got this giant missile shield that's a plasma interferometry shield designed, and the original idea was by Nikola Tesla to set up a shield around the planet. And this shield basically allows them to do three things. They can create an interferometry field that can literally turn the world into a weapon, trigger off earthquakes, volcanoes, and extreme weather. They can create an interferometry field that can create 100 million plasma ball over any city and fry it to death in a matter of minutes without firing one missile or one bullet. So if they want to take out Beijing, they just press a few buttons and bam, these and by the way, there's not just ground-based. That's why they took out the HARP. That's why people kept on saying HARP. I said, stop harping on HARP. That's old hat. They got stuff way more advanced than that. That's space-based weapon platforms and ground-based that goes through the earth and everything.
We're not the only ones. Russia does too, and the Russians.
No, their stuff is pretty rudimentary compared. Their stuff is pretty rudimentary. They can do some mobile stuff on trucks. Their stuff is tinker toy compared to ours. It really is. It's tinker toy. They can move a storm like off.
They still have advanced biowar. And
the problem is,
we got the high tech stuff that will blow up stuff and do all this stuff.
Oh yeah,
and
the point is you're
tiny submicroscopic viruses that will still turn us all into room temperature mush.
Well, you got a real good point there. I said this to the missile defense guy. It was going back to White Sands, and I said, so instead of 12 really deads, it's 11 really deads. I said, you can get hit on the side of the head by a stone, or, crushed between rocks, or somebody stabs you, and you're still dead. But I said, what this means...
It's still dead, whether it's an ICBM or a little tiny virus.
Right. So in other words, and we did war game simulations. We actually bought supercomputer time on the NOAA supercomputer up in Boulder, Colorado, and did a war game simulation on a
Ebola?
A virus we did a virus test, and the person was supposed to go from Cairo, Egypt to, believe it or not, Oklahoma City. This is 97. And we did a war game simulation with Dr. John Hughes, who's the reserve admiral in the Navy who was involved with the project with Rocky Mountain Ahmed. You can all check this all out. See, no, I don't believe that. And the FBI and CDC, we worked with the FBI and CDC in the Infectious Disease Department and the VA Hospital and the University of Colorado. We worked with them on Operation Top Off and Dark Winter, on war game simulations down at the PSL in St. Joe's Hospital, where we did a simulation on the second floor on 17th Avenue. We did another simulation down at the Performing Arts Center. All these things are done. I mean, and it's classified. You know what we did? We killed everybody. We actually were so incompetent, we never picked up on the cause of the illness, the source of the illness. We had hazmat officers going
and that was with one virus.
No, this is all simulation.
There's 50.
There was no virus. It was just a simulation. We'd send people.
I know, but it's a simulation of one virus. Imagine if there were 50 different.
Oh, you're totally done.
At the same time.
We had EMTs and hazmat officers and military people going to the various hospitals, Presbyterian, St. Luke's, St. Joe's, etc., we actually simulated. They would have to tell the nurse what symptoms they have, and the nurse would have to try to calculate with the doctor, was there a bioweapon, was there this or that, and they wouldn't tell them anything. And guess what? We never picked up on anything until everybody was dead, and the thing had spread like wildfire.
That's why you don't want World War III.
Yeah, and I work with it firsthand, so when you hear that from me, you're hearing classified information, Dr. Eagle is saying. No wonder I'm on the list. The bad or red your dead list.
Is your whole health constantly challenged? Would you like to age less? Then consider taking Ageless.
Things are, as I said, they're going in the crapper. Tim, it's not to be negative, and I tell people, remember Luke 21, when you see these things, hold up your head, and because your redemption is drawing nigh. I really think good people listening to this program, listening to your blogs, checking out other shows, finding out the truth. And I tell people the tagline of the show is, do not set us up as some kind of icons. Do not set us up as somebody to be knocked off because you think we're perfect. We're not. We're just people that are saved believers doing the best we can, which is with all our warts and all our problems and all our physical, emotional, and everything, and the way we talk and everything, we just try to do the best we can.
God helps us. God helps.
Right. I
got to tell you a joke. I heard this joke a couple years ago, but a buddy of mine at church was telling me it. The guy, a really bad flood is coming, and the water has got up to his door, and they send a fireboat by, and said, get in. He says, no, the Lord will save me. So the water gets up higher.
Oh, yeah, I heard that joke before.
Second floor, and then another boat comes by, and he says, well, I'm the Lord will save me. Finally, he's up on his roof, and they send a helicopter, and they drop a rope down and say, come on, your house is about to be swept away. And he shouts, the Lord will save me. About that time comes a big wave, and the house goes, and he drowns, and he goes up to heaven, and he says, Lord, it's not really my place to complain, but I don't understand. I trusted you. Why didn't you save me? And the Lord says, I sent 2 boats and a helicopter for you.
Well, exactly. For example, I might say to somebody, you need some conventional doctor help, and you need nutraceuticals. I can say you can need your pastor to turn from his evil ways of not opening his yap, and you need your politician to pull him on the mat and say, hey, people say, well, I want to just exit out of going to church, or I want to exit out of being involved with politics. You're stuck with it. You're stuck with the fact that the people in the church need to hear the word of the Most High God. If you're not there to interact with them, which is why we do our show, we're interacting with agnostics, atheists, transhumanists, people waiting for the aliens to save their butt because they're going to come from Nibiru.
Yeah, right.
I mean, do you understand? I mean, to tell people it's common sense here. The universe is a vast place, okay? Both good and evil. And the Bible gives us very clear indications that our God's still God. He tells us that the end time is a time when we should realize this is like the final, if you want to call it, colonic flush before the devil and his minions are finished on this earth. And I tell people it is a horrifying time. It's a scary as heck time because we got things like Fukushima, war everywhere. It says war and rumors of war, earthquakes in diverse places. This is Matthew 24. This is Jesus saying this, Yeshua HaMashiach, which means the Father in the flesh. And it's time for us to kind of start taking note that unless you have a Christian perspective, you think you can have a Muslim perspective or a Buddhist perspective or an agnostic or a transhumanist perspective.
You're lost.
You're going to be lost. You're not going to get it. You're going to think, well, I'll save myself with technology. I'll download myself. I'll save myself because Allah will save me. Come on. Allah's making sure these little factions are killing each other. And the Sabbatean Jews in Israel, they're about to bury themselves because they've got themselves so deep now thinking that their nuclear weapons and their Israeli army, they couldn't even defeat the Hezbollah with their tanks and their aircraft in South Lebanon against rocket-propelled grenades and tank-killing weapons. These idiots don't understand it's over. War is over. Nuclear war is over. Biological war is over. The idea that mankind, I call the coat of many colors, every nation on earth, and I'm going to give the prophecy of Joseph. This prophecy wasn't just given for Joseph in the time of famine. Did you read the latest reports about all kinds of meat? Chicken, fish, everything. Skyrocketing. Do you know we're in a famine right now? We're in the Joseph famine. We're in the famine that Jesus said there were 7, remember, Jesus was always there. He's God. When Joseph said this prophecy, we're 7 fat years and 7 lean years. We're in the lean years now. This is time when the blood moons mean something. When you can't buy meat anymore, and I'm telling you, a lot of people I think really should become vegans because meat is going to concentrate and bioconcentrate a lot of these radiotoxins, strontium and cesium. And I can tell you what's going to happen is people are soon going to find out that piece of this or that or bread and everything is going to go sky right through the ceiling. And it's not just the meltdown of the dollar. They want it to melt down to the point where the middle class dissolves. They want it to the point where...
I got to tell you, now's a good time to go into this paragraph that we talked about.
Yeah, do that. Read that off, yeah.
There's a very good article on Video Rebel blog, and it's a long article. I can't totally summarize it, but it basically talks about what happens when the dollar dies. Now, the global.
By the way, it won't just die; it'll be resurrected as a. They'll replace it with the
RFID chip and all that. But
yeah.
Anyway. Without going in all that detail. Okay, here's the last paragraph. Obama will have done the job Wall Street sent him to do. When the dollar dies, prices will double overnight. Apart from high prices, the only thing native-born Americans will be able to see will be nationwide food riots. With the amnesticized illegals that Obama has said now can come in the country, leading the charge. Quite a few black Obama voters will do their share of looting. After a week of writing, the dollar will totally collapse, and then it will be child's play for intelligence agents to get America's racial civil war going big time. That way, Wall Street can keep the $40 trillion they stole from us and steal another $20 trillion or more on the day the dollar dies. Then the bankers will be safe in their bunkers, knowing that no American politician will ever be able to successfully mount a campaign to arrest them and to seize their assets. And then the pump will be primed for a few plagues to be released to reduce the population of the world by a few billion.
Wow.
Now,
by the way, this ties in with another article I just recently got about what's called the medical child abuse. In other words, if your doctors in a specific state, and this is happening all across the country, are saying because the parents want to get a second opinion at another medical facility, the hospitals are now seizing children and saying that your parents are involved with medical child abuse. So they seize custody of the child, so they force them into treatments that the parents don't agree with.
Or force them to take vaccines, which, as we are finding out more and more, actually are part of the problem, not the solution.
Or force them to do full-dose paint-by-numbers chemo rather than going to somebody like the Brzezinski Clinic or a clinic in Europe or Mexico, where they can actually do gene-based therapy and find out which genes are turned on, find out which drugs, including chemo at low dose that won't screw you up, will do the trick, along with their Nutrimeds, will do the trick to actually turn off the cancer, and they much higher success rate.
If you don't get outside of the box, if you have a serious cancer or a loved one, they will die. Been there. I've done that with my wife. It was she died 15 years ago. The internet wasn't near as big as it is now. We stayed too much inside the box. We did all kind of the latest chemotherapy and all this. All it did was make her terribly sick, and then she died. But Big Pharma and the right doctors made a great deal of money off of her as she was suffering.
50% of people die of the chemotherapy.
Of course.
And even if they don't die right away, if they survive the chemo, for example, Donna Rubinson is a standard for breast cancer. And I remember mixing it up. They used to call it Red Devil. And this is back in 1978 when I was a resident in internal medicine, Vancouver General. And I remember I talked to the oncologist and said, I got this into some hangnails and they won't heal for a couple months. He said, so? I said, when I give it to patients, they go into coarse VFib, fine VFib, and they arrest, and I can't get them back even if I fry the hair in their chest. He says, is that a problem? I think, what? And I said, why don't we give these people IV hyperalimentation so they got some nutrition? They've been eating sugar water and haven't even been able to keep a meal down in weeks, so their electrolytes are all screwed up. And I said, we're not even looking at things like magnesium, which I'd already known was a problem because I'd had training already.
Or high-dose vitamin C and things like that.
And just keeping their nutrition balanced and giving them, hydrolyzed amino acids, because we had these Amagen and these other amino acids and so on back then. And he looked at me like I was from Mars, and I'm thinking, darn it, we don't even know what is causing their cancer. Now, cancer is a crosstalk between mitochondria and cells, where the cells are going anaerobic. And when cells go anaerobic, they can either go autoimmune disease or they can go toward cancer. And cancer means the cell antigens evade the immune system, but it's not just an immune problem, it's a genetic problem, it's a gene problem. And that's an example of insanity. And because they have the power...
so much of what you and I and most people call insanity is really reflective of demonic.
Well, they have power, and remember, don't be surprised at the fact that if you have someone with a white coat, they are 11 times more likely to be a serial killer. And that's a fact. This is not doctors that prosecuted this. This is socio-political scientists and PhDs.
By the way, Ebola is increasingly spreading in Africa.
Yeah, Ebola is the least of our worries. We got MERS, Middle East Respiratory Virus, H7N9, H5N1, H1N1. And, of course, if we start a war with these people, we're going to see Allah shall release the viruses before the mat and the refrigerator. Allahu Akbar. That's what happens. Back tomorrow, Harley Schlanger and Michael.
Henry Ford once said, a man who stops advertising to save money is like a man who stops a clock to save time.